Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the morning show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 14th, 2019. March 14th, I am reminded, makes it Pi Day. That message brought to you by the makers of Nerd Calendar, the people who brought you Nerd Wallet, I guess. I don't know. That one stuck with me from yesterday. So, very important day. I haven't seen that many people talking about it. It doesn't get the attention that Talk Like a Pirate Day seems to get. But I imagine Pi Talk traffic will pick up sometime later in the day. I don't know whether nerds are late risers or not. Maybe you can't pigeonhole all Pi-loving nerds into one. Uh-oh, I've already used the word pigeonhole. Okay, well, I used it as a verb. Now is a noun. Plenty to catch up on today. Not that we're going to get to any of it. It is Thursday. And now, let's see, the 14th, that makes it, I think, today is the 15th day, or maybe the 16th day, since the Senate was handed the House's resolution terminating the fake Trump national emergency. Trump tweeting about the national emergency this morning, adding to his sterling record on the subject, in addition to saying, I didn't need to do this, I just wanted to get the wall built faster. He tweets this morning that the national emergency, as most national emergencies is easily solved. It's easily fixed. All you have to do is whatever. Is it more, why don't you just ism? I guess here, all you gotta do is listen to me, build the wall, something, and we'll get rid of our border crisis, and we'll be done with it. So that's one of the well-known hallmarks of a national emergency. It's easily fixed, and you don't have to do it. Well, I guess if there's ever a court case about this thing, he's likely to lose. Unless, of course, he happens to fill the federal judiciary with his appointees who are loyal to him personally and draws them in the case. We'll see how well that goes. As a matter of fact, thought occurred to me yesterday. Actually came to mind yesterday when talking with Armando and Joan, and I only lately got around to remembering that I had this thought on impeachment. It did strike me, and I guess I'll have to look this up. The resolution of disapproval of the state of emergency also brought this to mind, because I began thinking about, well, what does the Senate really have to do, and what doesn't it have to do? As you'll recall, we speculated a couple weeks ago about whether or not McConnell would explore how much have-to there really is in the National Emergencies Act. It seems like he's going to comply. I think he'd like to just get the thing over with. And, I guess the president doesn't want to do a veto for whatever reason. I would have thought he would have been excited to do a veto. And I think he may be in the end. And he will do I assume he'll do the veto. I mean, I hope he doesn't. That would be great. But I was speculating about what kind of wiggle room there might be. Is it the sort of thing, though, that McConnell has so much on the line that he absolutely has to think about avoiding the vote, or would it just be convenient? So I suppose in the end, the determination on whether or not to go forward with the vote comes down to, well, what do I get out of trying to avoid the vote? There's a lot of work involved and a lot of trouble involved in proving that I can do it. And where does it get me? I don't think it gets me anywhere, so I might as well go ahead. But it made me think about impeachment a little bit, believe it or not. I just began thinking, how bound, I'm not certain exactly what the rules are. It doesn't come up very often, but I'll have to check it out exactly. What rules are there? I think there's just, we'll have to look in the book of precedents. I don't think the Constitution itself will answer this, but I'm not certain by what rules the Senate is bound to take up an impeachment that is handed to them by the House. I know that would be the next step in handling an impeachment, is you have the trial, and I don't doubt that they would get to it. I just don't know whether there's any time limits on it. how quickly they have to move. But I got to thinking about it in terms of the fact that since we have, about 700 counts we could impeach the president on, and thinking about him facing the courts once again over the national emergency declaration and the possibility that he'll eventually just pack the courts with his own people and begin to win on cases where there's no legal grounds whatsoever. I wondered whether you could just split up the impeachment counts into separate documents and just charge him on something else every week, essentially. I was curious about the possibility of handing the Senate 65, 70 separate impeachment resolutions in sequence and just keeping the Senate captured in impeachment trials. I wondered how many. There's a lot of important legislative work to be done, but they're not going to pass anything from the House. But in the meantime, they're just passing, or they're confirming very often highly unqualified judges to the federal bench at a record clip. And I wondered how many of them they thought they could get through if the Senate was constantly trying the president for impeachment, one after the other. There's no rule that says you have to send them all in one document. I'm sure of that. Anyway, just speculating out loud while catching up with the other news stories of the day. We'll start off with Greg Dworkin's collection of stories of the day, and then speculate on whether or not we can jump into hyperspace using the Constitution. Good morning, Greg.
Two thoughts about that.
Yeah.
First of all, I wonder, and by the way, is copyright, I know you can't write it, but you're allowed to speak and say, March Madness brackets. You could put all the counts into,
yes.
Brackets and see which one wins, and then you could charge them on that. The other vision I had as you were relating that is Nancy Pelosi working up all of these indictment counts.
Yeah.
And David sitting over at the Senate saying, well, prove to me you actually did that.
That's true.
I'm not acting on it until you show me you actually did. I saw it on TV, but where is it that you actually did these things?
That's right. They could just do that. That's true. You need proof of everything from these guys, and they prove that you need the proof every day.
Absolutely. So you know what? I'm going to start with the non-political, but may turn into political stuff.
All right.
With an acknowledgement that Beto's in the race as of this morning.
Right. Sorry, Beto. Gotcha. You're in. Hi. How are you?
You're in. Hi. You have the most beautiful dog.
I saw that. That is a very nice looking dog.
Yeah, it's a black lab.
I gotta go get
I'm sure Bill in Portland, Maine approves.
Yes, I would think so.
But I'm going to start not with that, but with the fascinating continuing story of the college scandal.
It's getting worse, dumber, both.
Well, it's got legs. It's resonating locally. Each local paper, each area is like quizzing their local college. So does that go on here and stuff like that? This is something that really is going to resonate. And of course, it's not hurt in terms of the resonating piece by some of the details that come out. You may recall Lori Loughlin's daughter, Olivia Jade, who has a big following.
Yes.
And had been taped as saying, I don't really care about school. I'm here for the parties, that sort of thing.
Oh, is that right? I didn't even notice that.
Oh, yeah. She was,
typical,
look, I want to give the school thing a try. I want to do parties. I want to see homecoming. But, frankly, I'm too busy. I got to talk to the dean, and hopefully we can balance this.
Okay.
College and my job.
It doesn't surprise me. She seemed to be there chiefly for Instagram influencer dollars somehow.
So today, I'm reading from TMZ, Lori Loughlin's daughter, Olivia, leaves yacht owned by top USC official. She went to USC, by the way.
Oh, okay.
As Lori Loughlin traveled from Vancouver to L.A. Tuesday to surrender to federal authorities in the college bribery scandal, which got her daughter, Olivia Jade, into USC. Olivia spent the night on the yacht of the chairman of USC's Board of Trustees, but she's off the boat now. Because she's friends with the Board of Trustees, the billionaire Board of Trustees' daughter.
I see.
And so they were all
spending
spring break in the area.
What area is that?
The Bahamas.
That's not even near USC.
Well,
but I guess it's spring break.
Okay, so they were all out vacationing, and of course Olivia Jade thought this would be a good idea, right? So
she thinks everything
turned out not to be such a good idea.
So she's friends with the trustee board. Is it because are they like, wow, she bribes us? We're friends, or were they friends already?
I'm
Do they
just
need to
saying,
bribe?
connections and connections and connections and connections, and so,
I guess so.
some people just live in a different world and have a different
Yeah.
life than others. And so the
guess
whole
so.
idea of meritocracy
Well,
is that, if you, and Chris Hayes wrote a whole book about this, Twilight of the Elites. The whole idea of meritocracy is to preserve the lifestyle for those who are already, at the top. We want our kids, not yours, our kids to get in fairly so that they can have the same life we have. That's the whole idea.
I see.
So do it on merit, right?
What merit?
Here's $500,000 to make sure that they get a meritorious admission.
Yes, well, that's very meritorious. That's 500,000 times more meritorious than the other guy's application.
Right. But anyway, I just, is it incredibly significant and adds to the story and changes the whole thing that she happened to be on this show? No, but it's emblematic of what's going on. And perhaps more importantly, this is the kind of thing that people read in the, the grocery aisles.
Yes.
And keeps this sort of thing going. Now, the fact that Jared got into Harvard by I'm not sure how, and the fact that Trump's kids got into Penn, I'm not sure how.
Same way.
Just makes it a political story maybe, but not the most important one. There's a whole lot of other more important things going on. But this is the kind of low-level thing that resonates. It just gets people mad, and being mad makes you come out and vote.
Okay, well, that's as political as anything then.
Yeah, pretty much. So in political world, of course, we have Beto O'Rourke, who has declared for himself this morning with his beautiful dog. And then what happens? I don't know. I'm taking a wait and see. I'm really not picking and choosing candidates. It's just way too early. I want to see how all of this, shakes out. And probably at this point then, so we have to hear from Biden, although everybody thinks Biden is in.
Yeah, do we have to hear?
And the one person who is I don't know, scratch your head on what's going on, is we have to hear from Stacey Abrams.
Yes, I am puzzled by the lateness of her hinting.
Yeah,
I guess
and
it must be
I
a
don't
strategy.
know that she's getting in. I have to tell you, though, so many people thinking about getting in is just telling you how weak Donald Trump is as a candidate.
Yes, everybody wants to be the one to. Anyone thinks they can knock him off.
Right. If
okay.
If Trump was really a strong candidate, everybody would be spending more time with their family.
Yeah, true. I mean, look at the last Democratic primary. When everybody thought Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in from the beginning, I mean, other people competed, true, but right at the beginning, everybody thought the nomination is hers, and we had like 3 people run.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a new Quinnipiac poll in Florida today. A bare majority of Florida voters, 51%, say they definitely won't vote for President Donald Trump if he's the Republican candidate in the 2020 presidential race, according to the Q poll. Another 31% they definitely would vote for the president. So definitely 31, definitely not 51. Those are not good numbers. 14% say they would consider voting for him. If all of them did, he'd still lose.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he loses. I mean, Florida's Florida, and it depends upon how you who you run against. It isn't just a question
who's in the newsroom.
Trump versus generic. Generic Dem, Mr. Dem, is not running. It's going to be somebody. Florida voters give Trump a negative 52% favorability rating. Joe Biden gets a positive 49.35. He's the only one that gets positive.
Really?
And let's see, negative 37.49 for Bernie, negative 26.44 for Elizabeth Warren.
Why?
Negative 15.30 among 18 to 34-year-olds, negative 23 to 30 for Kamala Harris, negative 20 to 30 for Cory Booker. Again, a lot of the non-Bernie, non-Biden Democratic candidates really aren't that well known yet, so I don't know what that means.
Okay, so nobody wins.
I guess. But that's the flavor of this. Jonathan Allen had an interesting set of comments trying to figure out how Beto O'Rourke compares to Barack Obama, and is that a good comparison, and is that fair to either one of them? And of course the answer is no. But Fox and Friends, on the other hand, perhaps had the definitive comment on Beto, because they said that he was seen in a picture with a bookcase behind him. And one of the people on Fox and Friends said, is he trying to make the case that it's like a good thing that he reads books?
Because there's a bookcase?
Yeah.
Well, all right. I mean, isn't that's
I looked at it and said, okay, yeah, well, whatever.
Pretty
it's good that
standard
he reads.
backdrop.
That's more than you guys do.
Yeah, we don't even know that. It was one of those sort of, that's where you do interviews. If you're a lawyer, you do the interview in the conference room with the law library, and the books are behind you.
Right. Armando commented on Jonathan Allen's observations trying to compare Obama and O'Rourke. Said, it's better than being compared to John Edwards, which reminded me that Josh Kraushaar had done a piece in National Journal this week about the 1970s, late 1970s or mid 1970s Democrats, how fractious it was with social issues and so on and so forth. And, my only observation to the multiple and myriad Democratic candidates running at this particular time as a pro tip is that maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to pick Tom Eagleton as your vice president.
Right, and he's not even going to show up.
Yeah, so that would not be good. But, there's. You want to talk about yesterday's stories, or do you want to talk about today's stories?
The idea is to talk about but yesterday seems good. So let's start with yesterday.
Let's start with there, okay? All
right.
So Boeing is grounding a bunch of jets where it looks like the preliminary reports without having, and they're sketchy, but make it sound like there's a lot of software issues with this plane that they should have known about because pilots were complaining.
Yes.
That's not good. That doesn't make Boeing look good. It certainly doesn't make the FAA look good. It doesn't make Trump look good. We were the last ones to ground it, and more to come on that.
Yeah, we should have been on top of that one. We should fire the administrator of the FAA.
Meanwhile, there's another story about this one in the Washington Post about advertisers ditching Tucker Carlson and Gene Pirro on Fox. That's certainly happening. The question is going to be how long and how prolonged.
That's right. Yeah, I heard.
We have the Manafort trial, with the sentencing. So now he's got at least 7.5 years. I say at least because in a remarkable coincidence, and it was really a nice bit of theater. Okay, so we get the trial judge saying there's no reason why Manafort lawyers keep harping on this collusion thing. Collusion is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about many and myriad crimes from a really rotten human being here who's done this, that, and everything else, and they're all bad. So he gets his total 7.5 years, and the judge admonishes the lawyer to stop talking about the collusion stuff. It is a non sequitur. It is not logical. It's got nothing to do with anything we're doing here. So the lawyer defending Manafort goes out and says, okay, well, the judge just said that collusion has nothing to do with this. You see, proving our point that collusion has nothing to do with this. And, that could have been a pardon dangle request. It could have been just, spin or whatever. But the fun part is that there were a bunch of protesters and hecklers there. And they were all ready, all of them were ready to do the Billy Crystal Carol King thing from Princess Bride. Because as soon as he opened his mind and said, see, the judge said there's no clue. Liar!
Right.
Liar! The judge said nothing like that.
Liar! I have that.
It was fantastic. And so he couldn't even get the sentence out about the sentence. He couldn't get his sentence out about the sentencing.
Yeah, well, that was fantastic. They did a great job. And nobody says you can't interrupt the press conference on the sidewalk.
Liar!
Yeah,
so,
excellent.
As soon as he did that, right when that was done, Cy Vance in Manhattan, the Manhattan DA, unseals his 16-count indictment against Manafort for various and sundry real estate fraud.
Yeah, he could use some redemption, Cy Vance.
Right. But obviously, timing is no coincidence. He waited for the end of this case to do that. And so just bad news for Manafort. And Manafort, by the way, given the bad news, cable TV and everybody else had a chance to remind everybody, oh, by the way, this was Donald Trump's campaign manager we're talking about here.
Oh, but something that has nothing to do with that.
And if you try to say that collusion has nothing to do with it, people are going to scream liar at you.
Yeah, that was well done. Great job by the protesters there, and not being intimidated by the official-looking thing happening, and the fact that there were cameras and microphones. And so what? You're just standing on the sidewalk. I can say whatever I want.
It's New York City. It's on the sidewalk in New York City. You think that's going to stop people from yelling at you?
DC.
Good luck.
Sidewalk anywhere. Oklahoma, you should yell at people.
Right. Anyway, so there's that.
Lie. Okay.
Meanwhile, while this is all happening, we get the news that Matt Whitaker came back for another sweat session with Jerry Nadler and Doug Collins, the ranking Republican in Judiciary. Okay. And after that closed meeting, Nadler made some new claims saying that basically Matt Whitaker completely screwed up, and he actually was asked by Trump to try to intimidate the Southern District of New York, but it didn't go anywhere. But that's a big deal in and of itself.
Yeah.
Now, Collins disputes that's exactly what they talked about, but, basically we're gotten to the point where whenever a Republican says anything in defense of Trump, Carole King pops out and says, liar, liar.
We have it.
Yeah.
Liar! I'm just going to do it again every time.
Good.
Oh, all right. Well, then go on. I'll just do it.
Liar! Exactly.
Perfect.
That's exactly what's going on. So, that was pretty much yesterday's news plus all of the college stuff. Now, today, we got more news coming.
All right, I'm going to click to that. Today.
Okay, but part of it is what happened yesterday.
Oh.
So, Donald Trump has this thing. We've been talking about the Senate parliamentarian and how they may or may not try to deal with the fact that the House has a joint it's an HJ Resolution 46. That's a House Joint Resolution. That's what HJ stands for.
Mm-hmm.
So this comes over to the
Olivia
Senate,
Jade.
and they'll be voting on it today. It says, convene and begin consideration of HJ Resolution 46 relating to a national emergency declared by the President on February 15, 2019. The debate starts at 10 a.m. according to the Senate schedule.
Oh, hurry up, guys.
So yesterday,
yes,
the Republicans were trying to maneuver ways to try to spare Trump the embarrassment.
Does he care?
He doesn't care, but he wants to not be embarrassed. I don't care about this at all, but if you don't vote my way, you're disloyal.
Yeah, well, that's true. But
so he was giving them mixed messages when they had their lunch, and Mike Lee was trying to come up with a way to try to spare the embarrassment. So he had this idea, and we talked about this a little bit on the show, I think. Mike Lee's idea was, okay, let me do a different law. It's not a different bill. It's not a amendment to this one, so we don't run afoul of the Senate parliamentarian who may tell me it's not germane. I don't know. I don't want to risk that. It's a separate bill. And the separate bill would essentially say, okay, Trump does whatever he wants with this one, but we're going to limit future things that he could do.
Yeah.
And that way, conservative Republicans who are constitutionalists like me will feel comfortable supporting the president on this HJ Resolution 46, meaning voting no, because we're going to vote yes on this other thing, and therefore we'll be able to sleep at night thinking we help preserve the Constitution. And that won't embarrass the president, and everybody's happy.
Right.
And he presents this, and basically Trump says, nah, that's a bad idea. You're wasting your time. I'm not going to do that. I don't like it.
Okay.
And essentially he said that, completely deflating Lee, and Lee said, okay, well, I'm voting against it then. I'm voting with the Democrats. And that's what's going to happen today. See, he's the fifth vote.
Yes, Trump still doesn't get this idea, this thing where, sometimes senators have to feel like they win against the president, or they start saying, well, then I'm not gonna. And he's like, well, what do you mean you're not gonna? I said to.
I love that because that's exactly what Mike Lee's vote, because again, you have to remind me, I don't know if this is a yes or a yay vote. I forget, sometimes that matters, but I have a feeling that Mike Lee is going to just stand up and say, I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Is that a yes or a no? I made my position clear.
That's how they'll call it. Mr. Lee.
It's a
Mr. Lee, nuh-uh. That's interesting. I'll put that down as a no. They make hand gestures.
No. I
actually.
meant yes when I said no.
And that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. If you watch them on C-SPAN
no,
too.
yes?
Oh, I guess it could happen. Right. Not sure what that hand gesture was. They usually on C-SPAN 2, you'll see them. The senators just gesture at the clerk, a thumbs down for no, and either a thumbs up or one finger up for aye, as they say in the Senate. And I'm not sure why they let them get away with that. But it does open up a whole world of possibilities of different gestures. I mean, there's a lot of fingers you could point out.
What about the middle finger gesture?
Right.
That's what Mike Leo
Is that a no or is that a yes? I'm not sure what that means.
This is a thank you, Mr. President. Just count the number of fingers here.
Number's not his strong suit, but I think he can get to one.
So that's what's going to happen today. And, we were thinking maybe it would get 5 votes. I'm thinking maybe now it'll get 9, maybe 10.
Yeah, and I'll put it in override territory, though nobody thinks the danger will actually arise. I'd love to see it. You know what? I mean, pissing off the Senate, well, normally not a smart thing to do. I'm sure he'll try it anyway, and we'll see how it goes, I guess.
Right. So anyway, that was yesterday's into today. So the big today's news is just watching to see how that Senate vote goes, plus anything else that breaks.
Yes, and lots of things will break because Trump is around.
Yeah, he breaks a lot of things, so
yeah.
We'll see what happens.
All right.
Anyway, and then, we got the Brexit vote, and no Brexit, no hard Brexit, no anything Brexit. We don't know what we're doing. Leave us alone. I don't know.
I guess, yes. That was a disaster all by itself. And
I still can't believe Theresa May hasn't resigned.
I guess it's just sort of like she must think the last thing we need is more chaos. So even me remaining here is better than.
She's a Remainer.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden, that's right. Now she votes for.
I'm a Mexit person.
Yes. No. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Still with us is Greg Dworkin. Are we still in today, or are we doing tomorrow's news?
No, I think we're done with today and tomorrow.
Okay. Oh.
And yesterday, and I think we'll just do the rest.
Okay.
That doesn't leave very much, I know, but
the entire future, I suppose.
Right.
But we'll rule all of that out, I guess.
So let's talk about something which is timeless, and that's about how people learn.
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? Not just the college scandal way of learning, which is to say I'm going to pay you to learn for me.
Right.
This is a situation where this is from ZME Science. People who read article snippets think they know more than they really do. Study shows.
Yes.
Right? Little knowledge can get to your head.
Damn.
When people only glance an article preview or snippet, they think they have a pretty good understanding of the topic, but that's generally not the case. And that's particularly important in the case of social media such as Facebook. And to make a long story short, people who read snippets know more than people who don't read at all.
Good.
They don't know as much as people who actually read the articles.
Oh,
and of course, people can sense or even measure how much you're reading because they can tell how much time you spent on a website, right? So you can click something, read it for 15 seconds, and then go on. There's no way you read the whole article.
Ooh, so we could use online data to identify voters who are smarter than other voters.
Yeah, the ones who read and the ones who don't. The Beta O'Rourke's, actually have a bookshelf behind them and presumably read, and the Fox and Friends, who just get their news from snippets. making
was
fun of
worried
people
about
who
that.
have bookshelves because, what, read books,
Look at that big, thick thing. Just read the cover. You can judge a book that way.
right? Researchers wanted to test this idea, so they recruited 1,000 participants split into 3 groups. The first one was asked to read through a full article from the Washington Post about genetically modified foods. The second one was given a Facebook news feed with 4 different article previews. And the third one was given no information at all.
Okay.
Then they asked them 6 factual questions. And the good news is even something as small as a Facebook snippet had a positive learning impact. While people who read the article answered the most correct questions, people who only read the snippets asked 1 or more correctly compared to the control group on average. So if you didn't read anything, you don't know anything. If you read a little bit, you know something. And if you read a lot, you know more. Duh.
This feels like an unnecessary study.
I know, but it just gives you an idea. The thing is that that may be their knowledge base, but people who read the snippets thought they knew much more than they actually did. That's the interesting part.
Right, yes.
Researchers found that the snippet readers were overconfident in their ability to answer the questions, and that was particularly prevalent in the case of participants who were emotionally invested in the story. These people were more unaware of the limitations of the required knowledge, and for them, the positive feelings associated with being accurate are likely to be as important as actually being accurate. Right? Yeah. I am really confident I know what I'm talking about because I know what kind of candidate Beto O'Rourke is going to be, because look at that dog. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I was a little bit worried about that at first because I know how many times I read snippets. That is, I do it every day. I comb through the stories and say that'll make an interesting thing for the show. And then it struck me, well, the reason the show sometimes only gets to like 4 stories is because we read the articles. So we're doing well, I think, ultimately.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we do our best to bring information and just sort of scatter it around and so on and so forth. So basically in my shortened segment today, that's really what I wanted to talk about. We can talk about anything else you want to talk about.
Oh, okay. Well, that's it? All right. Let's see.
I'm learning pronunciation.
Yeah, okay. Which?
Buttigieg.
Yes.
I'm boot, edge.
Boot, edge is what I was told.
I'm practicing that, trying to get that right.
I like
trying to say Beto and Kamala. I'm trying to learn these things. Julio.
Yeah. That's a
Joe. Like in Joe Biden. I've been working on that one.
Did you know? Yeah.
Did you know? Joe?
The boot edge one. I liked Mika Brzezinski's pronunciation guide, which was a little closer to Buddha Judge.
Yeah, but that's
that made
not
sense
he
to me.
says it. He says Buttigieg.
Yeah,
so I'm going with how he says it, because like, what do I know? I don't speak Maltese.
Yeah, I got a note from Arliss Bunny who said it was boot edge, but I had to ask, okay, I get that part. Is it boot edge? Is it boot edge? It's probably not boot edge, but which is boot or edge, the emphasis. And she says boot is the emphasis. I have not heard him say it enough, but yeah, I figured, Buddha Judge helps me understand, like, okay, where does the emphasis lie? And I try to just make more of an edge out of it than judge out of it. He'll be okay. And I thought Armando's Mayor Pete was good too.
Mayor Pete is a much better way to do it. It kind of
like the cool substitute teacher who says, "I'm just Mr.
or
Z."
Pete B or something like that. But
yeah.
I really would like him to make sure that he gets into the debates, because I think he brings a lot of policy wonkishness that I think is really nice to have. And another interesting observation from the Texas people is that Beto will base his campaign in El Paso, but a lot of the El Paso politicians, the Democratic ones, and a lot of the Texas border communities are probably going to endorse Julian Castro.
Yes, I did see early this morning that he had a list of endorsers that he came out with about an hour after Beto's.
Right. So does that mean anything? It's all interesting in terms of the before we get to the main event, including the debates section of the the brackets in Democratic candidacy here for the primary. It's way too early to really see how all of this sorts out.
Sure.
But the maneuvering is interesting.
Yes.
It's not like everybody in Texas is all of a sudden getting betamania.
No, apparently not. So that'll be interesting and competitive, and hopefully not destructive in any way.
I hope he does great. I hope he's good. He's certainly charismatic. That's a good thing. And Democrats like to get excited about a candidate. Sometimes they get a little bit too focused on who they picked to the detriment of everybody else. That's been known to happen. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we avoid that a little bit. And not just talking about 2016. This happens in a lot of different races. I mean, I'm old.
Yeah,
I go back to the 68 races, and were you for Gene McCarthy, or if you weren't, then there was something wrong with you, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And focusing on just the one when you got 20 good ones. So what happens if your candidate doesn't win? How are you going to feel about that, and where does that leave you? But, hey, that's not how you motivate people. People get motivated by falling in love with the candidate, so that's just the way it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, hurry up. Fall in love already. What are you waiting for?
Right.
Can you hurry love?
Meanwhile, you can't hurry love. You can't hurry Mueller. So the other thing that happened today is his crackerjack lawyer who does the money laundering stuff. I'm blanking on his name. Andrew Weissman, maybe?
Yes. I see he's a trending topic.
Down. Which makes you think that the money laundering piece of this is done from the Mueller perspective. Whoever he's indicted, he's already indicted, or they're unsealed indictments, and we don't know it yet.
Yes. Okay, well, we'll have to...
I'm no lawyer, but I would have thought that if those indictments were going to be unsealed, he'd stick around to present it to the judge like he did with Manafort.
Yes. He may have, I don't know, he may have to make college visits with his kids.
Yeah, I don't know. So we're still all waiting on the Mueller report, and we still think this is just yet one more sign that it might actually be winding down.
Okay. I see news that, sad news that former Senator Birch Bayh has died.
Oh, dear.
91 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reminded by other commenters that he was one of those who helped lower the voting age to 18.
Yep.
And also, Kate Sherrill says, unsuccessfully tried to eliminate the Electoral College, good idea, and pass an Equal Rights Amendment, now resurgent ERA. So, yeah, interesting fellow. Better and more interesting in many ways than his son, who's alive. But okay, he'll be wrapped up in the familial grief today, so we'll just focus on Birch for this one. That's too bad.
Right.
And a good reminder of what has come before.
Right. And it all matters. So with that, I think I'll just end my segment for today because I don't have anything else.
Okay. I will add one more thing because now I've scrolled down another inch. Kate's article that she sent from the Indianapolis Star here is he's billed as Birch Bayh, author of the 25th Amendment. How do you like that? He must have been...
But now you can't ask him how you apply it in this case.
No, and I wonder whether that...
You could ask Evan, but that would mean talking to Evan.
I guess that's true. He may have some idea about that, but I wonder what he was feeling in the last weeks, thinking, I wrote, there's here for a reason. Hello.
Right.
But,
I do have one thing to throw in here, which I think is kind of emblematic of Republican governance here. This is from CNN. It's entitled "Trump Alley Caught in Crossfire."
Trump
as
White
House clashes with GOP over Saudi Arabia, and it's basically a story about Senator Risch who took Bob Corker's place.
Okay.
And what a complete and total loser he is.
Okay.
Right? I just thought that was really good because it's DC style. You're really incompetent, aren't you?
Huh.
This is how it goes. Idaho Republican Senator James Risch, the new chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, decided last week to hold a classified briefing from administration officials on the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Risch, a staunch ally of President Donald Trump, staunching the wounds, that's what that must mean, had hoped the briefing would temper bipartisan criticism of Trump's response to the murder particularly among Republicans, angry over his reluctance to hold Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, otherwise known as Mr. Bonesaw, directly responsible. Mm-hmm. But guess what? It seems to have had the opposite effect. Can you imagine?
What?
The March 5th briefing was, by all accounts, a disaster. Treasury officials sent to update lawmakers were unable to answer even the simplest of questions about the White House's decision to ignore Congress's request for a report on the role the Saudi leader played in the death of Khashoggi, two sources told CNN. And afterwards, Rich appeared caught off guard by a visibly frustrated group of Republican lawmakers who privately confronted him to complain that the briefing provided no new information, according to several sources. Some even saw it as an intentional slap in the face by the administration. And rather than easing their frustration, the briefing only stoked Republican anger over the situation as many GOP senators emerged newly motivated to push back. How do they push back? They voted to sort of denounce the Saudi-Yemen war yesterday in the Senate. So today's slap in the face to Trump over the emergency declaration follows yesterday's slap in the face to Trump over his foreign policy.
That's a lot of slaps.
I think there's growing momentum here in Congress not to let Mr. Bonesaw off the hook, he said MBS. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said afterwards, and the incident was a stark reminder of the tension building between the White House and Republican lawmakers over the administration's support for Saudi Arabia. Again, as we saw in the vote yesterday. But to me, it's also the tension between somebody who, like Risch, thinks his job is to protect the president rather than to do his frickin' job as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a hugely important, normally nonpartisan job. And instead, he thinks his job is to defend Trump. And the Republicans are getting mad at him over this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand why people are mad at him. He's a jerk. And this, to me, is like an encapsulation of Republican governance.
Yeah.
Party over country. And he doesn't understand why people would get mad at him for that.
He doesn't have the experience to understand that. And it's curious that he even finds himself at the with the chairmanship here. I mean, he's just not that deeply experienced. I mean, he's been in the Senate for, let me look it up, 10 years, which is, ordinarily you would say, well, you should know what's going on. But as Senate tenure goes, that's not chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee level work. So this is somebody who, again, kind of came up in the campaign in a box era. And it's natural for him to think that, my job here is protect Republicans as opposed to, not only just protect Republicans, but he doesn't have any sense of platform making. The box comes to me. I don't know what to fill the box with when it's my job.
So here's more DC speak to translate for you. While sources close to Risch insist he's patiently navigating a complex situation, critics say he struggled to balance his natural inclination to protect the president, which I would add is wrong, with his oversight responsibilities as chairman, which I would add is his frickin' job. And then the next paragraph. That perception, in part, has been fueled by the stark comparison between Risch and his predecessor, former Tennessee Republican Senator Bob Corker, who, as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was among the staunchest Republican critics of Trump's foreign policy and his administration at large, at several points calling the White House an adult daycare center. So, in other words, Risch is hurt by the comparison to Bob Corker, who has a brain, whereas Risch doesn't, and Bob Corker, who knew how to do his job, and Risch, who doesn't. That's what this is saying.
Right. And I guess you can temper the fact that he succeeds Corker with his home state succession. Remember, he succeeds Larry Craig.
He failed Corker. I hesitate to use the word succeed in anything associated with Risch.
I guess that's okay. Fair enough. In terms of what people in Idaho expect of him, he's the replacement for Larry Craig.
He failed at Corker by replacing him, but he certainly didn't succeed because he's never succeeded at anything.
Well, he managed to succeed in getting elected statewide in Idaho a lot. I don't know what that takes,
but
I'm
also
getting some
got all
idea.
the Republicans mad at him and just made things even worse. And I think that his mishandling of it is part of the reason why the condemnation of Saudi Arabia with Yemen yesterday actually passed. because nobody has any faith that Risch knows how to manage this complex situation.
That's really...
Which is to say, everybody knows Trump is going to do whatever he wants and completely betray you so you can't work with him. Mm-hmm. Except Risch hasn't figured that out yet.
No.
Mike Lee did. Mike Lee did yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's slow in coming to him. I got to take a look at the lineup of the committee, and I wonder whether this becomes, not by itself it won't, but eventually, I guess, if he doesn't kind of shape up, this is a good lesson, and get to talking with your members, because if you keep doing this, eventually it's going to become an issue at the conference luncheons, and that's how you suddenly don't end up as chairman anymore. How does a chairman get replaced? All the members of the committee say, this guy sucks, get rid of him. So all right.
That
whispers
would,
at the lunch.
So you tell McConnell that, and McConnell pulls the trigger. I mean, how does that happen? Does it happen with the next
Not right
Congress?
away, I would guess. But yeah, I mean, it could happen sooner. But if it becomes a topic of discussion in the conference, like this guy is screwing us up, we're all running for, those of us running for re-election have to deal with the fact that there hasn't been a foreign policy agenda. We joined this committee for a reason. A lot of us are
and he's making us look bad.
Yeah. And he's right. He's in the newspaper for his incompetence. That's not a good thing. Mm. So, all right, let's see who's sitting behind him. Marco Rubio. Who knows what he'll do? Ron Johnson. Maybe this is why he's the chairman.
He'll condemn Venezuela. I know what he'll do.
Marco Rubio, Ron Johnson.
He'll talk about a German dam.
Cory Gardner. That's not going to help. Mitt Romney. That's not going to help. Lindsey Graham. I'm sure he thinks he should be the chairman.
He's already chair of judiciary.
Yeah, so he values that above foreign relations, but he's probably, grinding his teeth. Johnny Isaacson, John Barrasso, Rob Portman, Rand Paul.
This is not sounding good.
Todd Young, Ted Cruz. Yeah, that's also interesting is that if they do go to the conference and complain and McConnell starts hearing the complaints, I don't see more than two that McConnell would care about in this list. I mean, McConnell doesn't care what Ted Cruz complains about, what Todd Young complains about, Rand Paul. Probably not much for Rob Portman, but maybe. Barrasso and Isaacson might be important to him. And other than that, it's a bunch of empty suits.
Yeah, speaking of empty suits, I'll finish by letting you know that, by the way, Roger Stone is due at 10 a.m. for a status hearing, where the same judge from yesterday gets to talk about, that was a good idea to publish a book after I told you that you should shut yourself up. Now, what they're doing is describing, because it hasn't started yet, Roger Stone's sartorial arrangements for today. He's arrived at the courthouse with his lawyers, waiting for the security line. Mm-hmm. He's wearing a light gray double-breasted suit, a light blue shirt, a navy or dark purple tie, and a pocket square. And he's also got a silver chain attached to his lapel that goes into his upper pocket, so that might be a pocket watch.
Or a fake.
So talk about empty suits. There's one right there.
Yeah, he's a bit of a fop.
No top hat, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Right,
I really wanted him to go wearing a top hat and a monocle, looking like Mr. Moneybags from Monopoly. That would have been so cool.
He has done that. That's his famous inauguration shot.
I know. And so why couldn't you go like that? That would have been great.
Antagonize the judge.
No. He's going to be a little restrained.
Yeah. A little bit. Pocket square.
Yeah.
All
anyway,
right.
That's on the docket for today, too.
All right.
So with that, I'll leave you. I'll let you do the rest of the show. But this is Thursday, and I'm Greg Dworkin, speaking to my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. We perhaps, as somebody suggested on Twitter, should do a Dogs of the Democratic Contenders, since Bailey, Elizabeth Warren's dog, is a very, very attractive dog, and a good boy.
Okay. Well, yeah, why not? We'll just judge them on that. It's at least as good as anything else.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
All right, very good. Thanks. Have a good weekend, and try to survive. Thanks, Greg. Let's see. Things to add to the conversation. A couple of things occurred to me along the way that I guess some of which are important, some of which are not. But the Tucker Carlson story I thought I would spice up a little bit with the news that Tucker Carlson, under fire from almost all corners, conservative and otherwise, is going on vacation. And this is a familiar Fox News MO. Every time one of their hosts gets in trouble or is going to be fired, they go on vacation. And every time everybody notices that that's the case, somebody from Fox denies that that's the case and says that this was a planned vacation. And I understand it was Sean Hannity who, to whom it fell to insist on the air that Tucker Carlson's vacation right here, right now, is totally planned and everything's fine. Let's see. Newsweek reporting on it. What else have we got here? That's interesting. Vacationinspire.com. I guess this looks like an aggregator that just picked up the fact that the word vacation is in the headline. It's just funny that these things work that way. Here's Alternet has the story, among others, that says it was Sean Hannity announcing that Tucker Carlson was going on vacation and it was totally planned. I guess we'll click on one just so we have a reference for you later. Hopefully there's I knew there was going to be auto playing video. Why would I have done that? I got to look up again how to block that. I had that all set and blocked on my laptop and forgot how that was configured. Anyway, Newsweek has this story. Is Tucker Carlson going on vacation? ? Fox News denies host is leaving after Sean Hannity handoff. I don't really need to read the story. I just think that's an interesting aspect of how Fox News handles things. And let me see. I'll just mark that one so I can include it in our roundup later on today. The other story that I thought needed some additional comment was the Boeing story. As I understand it, like yesterday, the news that they were grounding these planes in the United States reached me late. Of course, we came to the story late as a country. I guess we were, as it turns out, we were the last country on Earth willing to let these planes fly, which is interesting and unusual by itself, I guess, and perhaps tells us something about the decision by Ethiopian authorities to send the flight data recorder, etc., to France for analysis as opposed to the United States. I gather that there's some feeling that sending it to the United States at this point in time, and maybe ever, who knows how the Ethiopians feel about this, generally speaking, and here's hoping they never have to consider such a thing ever again. But I think that really, if you have a tragedy like this and you want to get answers, I'm not certain that you would feel comfortable sending it to the United States here in a situation where an incompetent boob of a president who's under the sway of corporate actors who call him on the phone, and maybe even actors who play corporate actors, for all I know, and hobnob with him, and he's the kind of person who you who you could very easily see caving to pressure from corporate CEOs who he likes to think of as peers, even though they never were, even when he was in business, to simply, to influence the investigation. In other words, if the NTSB were to hold an investigation about the crash, I would worry, and I guess the Ethiopians worry too, that Trump would order the NTSB to come up with a finding that's favorable to Boeing's corporate interests as opposed to whatever the truth might be. So that's a problem. But even worse was, as we pointed out yesterday in reading various tweets, including Rachel Maddow's initial tweet, that one, the Federal Aviation Administration, you can't fire the administrator because there is no administrator. There's an acting administrator, like so many departments in throughout government. Trump is going without a head of that bureau and just working with acting officials for various reasons, which we've discussed on the show before. But also he has no Federal Aviation Administrator because apparently his initial attempt at naming one was, how about my personal pilot? And when everybody said, forget that, he just said, screw it then, I won't have an FAA administrator, and then we haven't had one. Worse, though, if I can cram this in just before the break, I have an article. Let's see. I just looked this one up. Hopefully no auto-playing video over at Mother Jones. But they are among several outlets to report that the government shutdown caused or had a role in all of this. That apparently all of the complaints from pilots about whatever the problem was with these Boeing 737 planes got kicked up the chain, and the FAA, even with its only acting officials, did decide to begin doing something about it and begin holding some discussions and perhaps some negotiations with Boeing about how to deal with the problem. But then the government shutdown came along, and for 5 weeks, no progress was made, and whatever progress had been made was basically erased by the fact that all the people working on the problem were furloughed for the shutdown. And then, finally they got things back on track, but I guess it was too late. And gee whiz, all of a sudden, an Ethiopian airliner falls out of the sky. Who knows whether they might have found a software solution and implemented it, at least in part, in the 5-week interim, but it doesn't really look all that good. We'll say that, and that's the best you can say about it. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Here we are. Let's see. I will continue on with this. I'll read through the Mother Jones report on this, but I don't know whether this brings out this flavor, but I got the sense that when, I guess there were 2 countries, as I heard it, still not grounding the Boeing 737s, and United States was one, and Canada the other. And then when Canada finally said, all right, we also will ground these planes, that left us alone. I don't know if that changed Trump's mind. He's the sort of person who you would think would say, oh, so Justin Trudeau finally did it? Oh, I'm still not going to do it. But eventually they were grounded, and it seemed like, well, first of all, ordinarily that's the sort of decision that gets made by the FAA. But, well, we don't have a real administrator here, and the acting administrator knows only that last I heard Trump was resistant to this, so our position is don't ground them. And I don't know whether Trump ever, once he changed his mind, whether he ever said, all right, get the FAA on the phone and tell them we're reversing course and that they need to ground the planes, which I think would have happened in the ordinary course of things with a normal president. But one, he doesn't know, to do things like that. And 2, I think he really wanted to do it this way. By the time the news reached me, the impression I got, and I don't have anything to back this one up now that I think about it, but maybe I can dig it up. But what struck me was that he seemed to want to do it like, I'll do it by executive order. Forget the FAA. I will bypass them and use this as an opportunity to appear strongly strong and ground the planes myself. By authority of me, the president, I hereby ground these planes. So he's the big hero in all this. Anyway, meanwhile, it turns out that he may have effed the whole thing up from the beginning. So the Mother Jones story report. Trump's shutdown played role in delaying crucial Boeing fixes. Ine O is our writer on this one. I hope I've pronounced the Ine, I-N-A-E, correctly, but don't bet on it. The story starts actually right up at the top with an update from yesterday afternoon. After days of resistance, President Trump announced Wednesday afternoon that the Boeing 737 MAX planes would be, quote, grounded immediately. So he's doing it himself. Now, previously, they had reported the following. Despite mounting calls from lawmakers in both parties to temporarily ground Boeing 737 MAX airplanes following 2 recent crashes, the Federal Aviation Administration on Wednesday once again expressed confidence in the aircraft, claiming that U.S. officials had found, quote, no basis, unquote, for barring flights. This in contrast to Trump's hints that all planes, perhaps, but certainly this one in particular, were death traps and falling from the sky like flies. Tweeting the exact opposite of what you're supposed to be doing in this situation as the president. The FAA's resistance to grounding the planes comes amid an intensive effort by Boeing to court the Trump administration, which is the sort of thing that might lead Ethiopian officials to lack confidence in the FAA/NTSB's ability to tell them what happened. So let's see. Embedded here is a tweet from Kenneth Vogel. Because I never remember anything, I had to click through to see. From the New York Times, I can never keep straight who works for who. And besides, it's subject to change every 10 minutes. But Ken Vogel's tweet here about Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg, I guess it's spelled not like the college or the Pennsylvania town, but M-U-I-L-E, Muhlenberg, but it probably just says Muhlenberg. Spoke by phone with Trump, all caps, this AM, urging him not to ground 737 MAX 8s after Sunday's crash. Muhlenberg has tried to cultivate Trump. He visited Mar-a-Lago after the Air Force One dust-up, and Boeing donated $1 million to the Trump inaugural, which is a dirty, dirty pool of money. Anyway, the story continues. Whatever the FAA's motivations, another troubling aspect of the story is now emerging. A report on Wednesday from the Wall Street Journal cites U.S. officials appearing to suggest that the recent government shutdown caused by President Donald Trump's demand for money for a border wall, I like that note, was partly responsible for delaying crucial software fixes for the Boeing aircraft. From the Journal, it wasn't the Journal saying it was caused by Trump, that was Mother Jones saying it. Here's what the Wall Street Journal had to say. A software fix to the MCAS flight control feature by the FAA and Boeing had been expected early in January, but discussions between regulators and the plane maker dragged on, partly over differences of opinion about technical and engineering issues, according to people familiar with the details. Officials from various parts of Boeing and the FAA had differing views about how extensive the fix should be. U.S. officials have said the federal government's recent shutdown also halted work on the fix for 5 weeks. And that's an eternity in software fixing land, I think. The FAA concluded the delay was acceptable because its experts agreed with Boeing that there was no imminent safety threat, according to one person briefed on the discussions. The FAA also determined that steps taken after the Lion Air crash, the first of the two, to inform pilots worldwide about the system's operation were adequate to alleviate hazards. The report comes just 1 day after the president warned that technological innovations were hampering the aviation safety. I don't know about you, but I don't want Albert Einstein to be my pilot, he tweeted. I would think it would be great to have Albert Einstein as your pilot. Why wouldn't you want a smart pilot? I'm not certain what he thought he was getting at there. I know his criticism was that planes were too complicated and you had to be Albert Einstein to figure out how to. But, I mean, pilots are pretty highly trained people, and they're pretty smart people, and they got a lot of training in the sorts of sciences that a lot of people who are otherwise smart think are very difficult to understand. But okay, whatever. Anyway, the real takeaway here was government shutdown, crashed 2 planes. I think we can just draw the line directly there. Why not? All right, you can't, but it's important to note. And again, also I was just struck by the stupid way in which he decided he had to be the guy announcing the grounding as opposed to using the Federal Aviation Administration as it was intended. All right. Catching up with other comments. Let's see. All right. I've got, let's see. Greg shared another thing here. Oh, yes, this is going to be a long read, what he has sent us here, so we might have to stash that one for Friday. Let me catch up with other things that came through. Anything else that we need to add to the lineup that we can get through today? All right. No, I think we're good. All right. Oh, yes, that's right. We want to check the KITM hashtag, which we have to do manually here until we get everything else under control. But, all right, looks like we're good. On to other things put away in pocket. Let's see. Here's a note of interest on the college cheating scandal. Let's see. This one from Talking Points memo. How do we get to the original here? All right, we'll try this one on here. I don't think does TPM ever send us to auto-playing video? I don't know. Let's see. I'll be on the lookout for it. Fake charity. This is the new news. A fake charity at the heart of college cheating scandal. It made me think, fake charities. Where have I heard stories about fake charities before? It does ring a bell. Sally Ho is the author of the piece for Talking Points memo, which is illustrated by with a picture of the guy at the center. Well, it's William Rick Singer. Looks like he might be leaving with his lawyer from someplace, but Rick Singer loved his work as the torturer guy in the Arnold Schwarzenegger film True Lies. He looks like that guy, the guy who was supposed to be responsible for torturing him. And I guess the guy behind him maybe is his lawyer who looks like John McLaughlin. But okay, that's what they look like isn't the important point. What's important is the headline and nothing else. Fake charity at heart of college cheating scandal. The mastermind of a wide-ranging college admissions scandal set up a charity that wove a deep web of deception and fraud to mask bribes and payoffs, funneling millions of dollars through the tax-exempt organization under the nose of U.S. officials, according to prosecutors and tax documents reviewed by the Associated Press. Is Sally Ho a reporter for the Associated Press or a reporter for TPM? I am not sure. Let's see. Does it tell me anything about that at the bottom? Sometimes TPM's an aggregator at times, as well as an original news reporter. Sometimes it's difficult to tell where they're getting their stuff from, but I think normally they designate when they're taking from the AP. So I'm guessing Sally Ho works for TPM, but this seems pretty fascinating, actually. I think the mechanics of the way they set this thing up is pretty interesting. We haven't really talked very much about that. Nobody really has talked a great deal about it. I guess maybe it's brand new news, but it's one of the less sexy aspects of the story. But it's fascinating to learn, all right, well, if you're handing around all this money, you got to do something to disguise it, right? You can't just have all these college coaches or admissions officials or whatever sitting on gigantic piles of money, unable to explain where it came from. And you can't have all these parents just giving you $1 million and saying, here, go give this to, as a bribe. It would be imprudent and create a lot of difficult to explain situations among the sort of people who in olden days anyway, and I guess we're living in a new era now, would have found themselves subject to audit from time to time. So how did they deal with this? And the answer is fake charity. Where did he get that idea? William Rick Singer registered Key Worldwide Foundation as a charity in 2013, gaining accredited 501c3 status with the federal government. Its tax filings reported revenue that doubled each year, from $451,600 in its first year to $3.7 million in 2016. I don't know about doubling every year, but that doesn't sound like an out-of-the-question trajectory for a connected charity. Singer, painted by prosecutors as the ringleader of the biggest school admissions scandal ever prosecuted by federal authorities, how many of them have there been, is accused of funneling money from wealthy parents through his foundation, then using it to bribe coaches and others to get their children, the children of the wealthy parents, into elite universities. Prosecutors said he also accepted so-called donations from clients to help their kids get a coveted enrollment spot through cheating. The scheme allowed the parents to claim tax deductions for themselves. So on top of all of this nonsense happening, all the money they were paying in bribes was alleged to be tax deductible. That's pretty amazing. So they were basically, taking money out of the pockets and off the table for everyone else in the country while they were doing it. I can't imagine tax exemptions for bribes to cheat on the SATs and get your kids into college. By funneling millions of dollars with such apparent ease, nonprofit experts are renewing their criticism of the IRS's limited ability to police wrongdoing. There is not an enormous amount of resources at the IRS and in other parts of the government to provide oversight in real time. What we're seeing now is it took years for the government to break down this situation, said Larry Lieberman, former chief operating officer at Charity Navigator, a nonprofit watchdog. Singer pleaded guilty to fraud and conspiracy charges in federal court Tuesday in Boston. Coaches and dozens of parents are among the 50 people charged in the scheme, including actress Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin, and high-achieving figures in such fields as law, finance, and fashion. And here we, I think, would do well to, where's all my stuff here? To take note of a comment made. I've seen a couple of people make this comment, but this morning, oh, come on, where can I get over the view of Twitter on this machine? I tell you, it is annoying as hell. There they are. I just wanted to scroll through. Which of you, a lot of you have made this point. Here we are. I think this is what we're talking about here. Rebecca Roman's making the objection, as others have. Why are the mothers being charged and not the fathers? I'm not certain that they're not being charged, but they're certainly not being named. A lot of people have noticed that it's weird that they're hanging this scandal on the mothers. On the one hand, you might think, well, my first reaction was, well, they've got famous moms, so they're hanging it on celebrities. But as it turns out, they have famous dads, too, and they're just not talking about it for whatever reason. Lori Loughlin's, let me read through the comments. Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman's husbands were involved, says Rebecca. Why aren't they turning themselves in? So maybe they're not charged in all of this, and I don't know exactly why. And there might be, a legal reason for it. It might be that one's name is on all the documents, and that's what you can do with it. But as Matthew Rigdon points out, and I'm sure Rebecca knows very well, Lori Loughlin's husband was indicted and had to post bail. It's not mentioned in most articles since no one really knows who he is, but he's a fashion designer. But Felicity Huffman, well, her husband is more famous. But the thing is, her husband's more famous than she is. So I'm just curious about why they don't talk about the fact that it's William H. Macy is Felicity Huffman's husband, not charged in all this. And I guess it's possible that he didn't sign the papers. I doubt very much that he didn't know what was going on, but I guess maybe it's possible. We don't know what the facts are. I don't know what the facts are on the ground in terms of who did what. But Lori Loughlin's husband, I guess, actually was indicted, and that's I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say. That's good. I don't know that it's good. It just is. But anyway, it is kind of a disturbing aspect of all of this. That you could have sold this story with William H. Macy, don't you think? Anyway, also lots of interesting commentary on the high-achieving figures in such fields as law, finance, and fashion. There were a lot of names named, finally. But I guess one more comment before we move on. High-achieving figures. Are they? Are they really? Maybe they are, and it's the kids who aren't as much high achievers, so they're using their success to try and push that. And, it's not a terrible idea to try and use whatever, legal means anyway. You've got to push your not high achieving kids to becoming high achievers if they're capable of doing it. It has to be done with a certain amount of sensitivity, not only to the kids themselves, but the kids around them as well. But, I just, sometimes now the whole thing makes me wonder, are you high achievers or are you just average people whose parents before them pushed to get them into schools that have the reputation of producing high achievers, and then you just sort of stumble on from there? One of the reasons people want their kids at the brand name schools is because even if they're not high achievers themselves necessarily, one, they might pick up some good habits, but two, they get to know people who are high achievers and tend to draw from the ranks of people they know for their initial efforts, their entrepreneurial efforts, startups, etc. Right? You're a decent person with a decent academic record, but not cut out to be a student leader at Harvard, let's say, but you're there, and you're down the hall from, whether it's the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world or somebody else, you're on hand to be scooped up as a capable administrator in a startup that's going to net you, a couple $1 billion in windfall when the startup takes off and becomes a world-leading product. You're in the right place at the right time. Were you the genius who thought of it? No. Were you innovative in your administration of it? Not necessarily, but I was in the right place at the right time. And look, that doesn't happen quite as often at other institutions. That's why people want their kids there. And sometimes I think the parents are believed to be high achievers for the same reason, having achieved their successes, all of that in scare quotes, mostly from being in the right place at the right time. Anyway, let's continue with the TPM article. The Internal Revenue Service, there should be an international one, but there isn't, has been investigating the criminal case jointly with the FBI, said Amy Hosny, special agent with the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division, who called it a very troubling scenario. It is. With the alleged payments from the parents through the foundation, remember what we're talking about, the fake charity? Back on that again. The payments from the parents through the foundation as donations and coming out the other side as bribes, we're certainly looking at the transactions. Much of the $2.7 million that Singer funneled as grant donations appears to be part of an elaborate charity scheme to mask his reported bribes to university coaches, according to an AP analysis of the foundation's 990 tax records. Singer then used the money to pay off his co-conspirators, prosecutors say, including administrators of college entrance exams who rigged the ACT and SAT testing process, and university coaches who put students who didn't play sports on team recruitment lists to improve their chances of getting admitted to schools such as Yale, Stanford, and Georgetown. The charity claimed to give the most grants to the University of Southern California, where the yacht is. 9 in all that totaled $550,000. Now, that's not enough to buy a yacht. The guy had to be a billionaire on his own. Anyway, USC officials wouldn't comment on whether it ever received such donations, but the grant descriptions and amounts allude to the bribes that prosecutors noted, including $175,000 to, quote, USC water polo, unquote, and $100,000 to USC soccer programs. Coaches in those programs have been indicted on criminal charges. In 2013, with Singer as Key Worldwide's president and CEO, the charity gave out 2 grants, $10,000 to Georgetown Tennis and $100,000 to an organization called Fullerton Football Academy Incorporated, with an address belonging to California State University, Fullerton. Chi Chung Kyung, that's my best guess at the pronunciation, spokesman for Cal State Fullerton, said the university discovered through state records that the organization listed by Singer is actually tied to USC women's soccer coach Ali Khosrow Shaheen. Let's try that. Ali Khosrow Shaheen, who was indicted in the sweeping criminal case this week. Khosrow Shaheen, maybe, previously coached at Cal State Fullerton, which does have an affiliation with a different program that bears a similar name to the one Singer listed. Cal State Fullerton, Georgetown, Yale, and New York universities, not New York University, but universities in New York, said they never received the donations that the foundation claims to have dispersed to them. Interesting. Aside from grants, Singer also found other ways to pay a coach. Former Georgetown tennis coach Gordon Ernst was named a consultant and paid $1.3 million by the foundation. Georgetown said it had already fired Ernst for violating admissions rules before he was indicted. Some of the foundation's other listed donations were fake, while Singer used some of them personally. DePaul University. You wouldn't necessarily think that they would show up on the list. Well, DePaul University confirmed it received 3 grants from Key Worldwide that Singer made as a parent, which the Chicago school solicited. You see, his son graduated from the university in 2017. The grants were designated for study abroad programs, though Singer listed them in tax records as for the Religious Studies Department. Some grants were listed as going to organizations whose connections couldn't be verified. They include community donations, which shared an address. That's the name of the place they were donating to. Community donations, which shared an address with Singer's foundation. And philanthropic efforts such as the Friends of Cambodia, a group that told the Palo Alto Weekly that it didn't know of and had never received money from Key Worldwide. So, well, look, very interesting. Interesting aspect of this whole scandal, that they erected a fake charity around it, and adding insult to injury, everybody's taking tax deductions for the bribes that they're paying. Wow. But I have a feeling that we'll learn some more lessons about this as time goes on. All right, let's see. Let me catch up with another strange story. Perhaps we'll save that one for after the break, but we might as well think about that. But I guess here's a thought I can leave you with before the break. Tweet storm from Mark Ames, guy who used to work at The Exile and had some public relations troubles of his own a few years ago. I don't ordinarily go to Mark Ames, but I thought he made a good point here, and you can still make good points. Of the many perks of being an oligarch, we find out, remember he did a lot of work in the former Soviet Union, your mega wealth defines what's corruption versus what is a donation or philanthropy. A lot of people pointing out, of course, buying a building at a university is still a, quote, legal way into the back door in these schools. But he goes on to say, this country, meaning this one, not Russia, but Russia too, I guess, this country is obscenely corrupt, and it's getting worse decade by decade. Big media, just doesn't like talking about American corruption, mostly because it's a pillar in structural U.S. corruption and spends most of its efforts trying to distract us. And I understand the sentiment, and I would express it a little bit differently. I don't know that it's the case necessarily among most journalists, but it's certainly the case among a lot of publishers that they participate in this gray area between philanthropy and corruption, let's say. What's sick and demented, or what rather, he says, what a sick and demented culture. Once again, what a sick and demented culture. Daddy makes millions as a vulture capitalist, private equity, quote unquote, uses part of his loot to train his daughter how to fake a learning disability, squeezing out real disadvantaged kids with real disabilities. This is quoting the tweet of Michael Tracy, who I'm also not in the habit of quoting, but discussing the way they got fake proctors in there to help kids out on the SATs. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's continue in the follow-up to the college cheating scandal update with this tweet storm from Mark Ames. I'm not wild about, like I said, reading through Mark Ames's timeline, and especially when he's quoting Michael Tracy, two guys among the many, I take with a grain of salt sometimes, but, I don't block or mute the two of them because occasionally there's something useful in there and some sentiment with which I agree, and sometimes it runs away with them, sometimes not. And in this case, I think I'm pretty good with this. Mark Ames, though, complaining based off of Michael Tracy's tweet about a guy, and we'll find out who that is, who is the daddy making millions as a vulture capitalist in quote-unquote private equity, uses part of his loot to train his daughter how to fake a learning disability, squeezing out real disadvantaged kids with real disabilities. Part of the scheme here for cheating on the SATs was taking advantage of accommodations that the testing services make for kids who actually have a disability of one kind or another, and allowing for extra time or allowing for perhaps even help in the testing room itself. And exploiting that is pretty disgusting all by itself. But what's happening here apparently is you teach kids how to, go along with the scheme to fake the disability so that they can have a special proctor in there along with them. And instead of doing the sorts of things that a special proctor might actually do for a real learning disabled kid, they are instead feeding the answers or correcting the answers as they go along in real time. Let's take a look at the Michael Tracy tweet here that he's included here. The tweet reads, "This person, co-chairman of a huge international law firm in New York City, is alleged to have participated in a scheme that involved coaching his daughter to fake a learning disability, hiring someone to take classes for her, and finally paying a $75,000 bribe to fabricate test scores." Person in question, apparently Gordon R. Kaplan, co-chairman of Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher, LLP. And, he's got a nice high-profile bio page here at the firm, and is exactly the sort of background that you'd think when you hear Michael Tracy describing him that way. Partner in the private equity practice group and corporate and financial services department, focusing on private equity, leveraged buyouts, mergers and acquisitions, recapitalizations, venture capital, and technology-related corporate matters. And I guess that left him with plenty of money on hand to do these things. Now, Mark Ames, having noted this, continues on by pointing out that it is the 20th anniversary of Citibank chairman Sandy Weill, is it Wheel or Weil? Weill, deal with Jack Grubman to fraudulently upgrade AT&T stock to buy in exchange. That is, as an investment advisor, they were saying everyone should buy AT&T stock. This doesn't ring a bell with me. I don't remember everything in the world, but it sounded like a good point. So I guess 20 years ago, Citibank chairman made a deal with Jack Grubman, who I guess was the analyst, the former, as it says here, former star telecommunications analyst at Salomon Smith Barney, the unit then of Citigroup, of course. So Citibank chairman tells Citigroup subsidiary Salomon Smith Barney, I want you to rate AT&T stock as a buy so that the price goes up and I make money. And in exchange, what I'll do for you, Grubman, is I will use my influence with a top New York City preschool. Yes, preschool. I'm sure you've heard the stories that in New York City, everything is exaggerated. But in New York City, there's actually like elite preschools that are feeders to elite private grade schools, which are feeders to elite private high schools, which are feeders to elite private colleges. And I guess you got to go through the whole thing in order to be, to have the best shot at being able to pay the lowest bribe to get your kid to Harvard at the end of that, provided they don't turn into preppy sex murderers along the way. And that's a low percentage thing. I should point that out, just to be fair. So, that was the deal. Grubman would rate AT&T stock a buy. Wheel makes a bunch of money for it, presumably, by selling his AT&T stock to people who are willing to pay more for it than it's really worth. And as a payoff, he gets Grubman's twins into this preschool. Grubman got a slap on the wrist, no one jailed, no one perp walked, and included is a New York Times clip on the subject, Wall Street and the nursery school, a New York story. So you can read it for yourself. Goes on, though, to make an excerpt of the important point, I guess. Ames quoting here, I used Sandy to get my kids into 92nd Street Y preschool. It's not even that private sounding. It's not like, the Felicity School for precocious children. The 92nd Street Y preschool. So a hipster situation, right? We're like a down market sounding but awesome preschool. 92nd Street Y preschool, which is harder than Harvard, it says in parentheses, and to get into. I mean, I'm sure the coursework isn't quite as challenging. And Sandy needed Armstrong's vote on our board to nuke Reed in showdown. I'm not even sure exactly what that means, but quoting from The Observer, which I guess later was bought by Jared Kushner, whatever. And here's the screenshot with the highlighting here. In 1999, Mr. Grubman, then a high-powered analyst, bumped an AT&T stock from neutral to buy, thereby so appeasing AT&T CEO Michael Armstrong, that he cast a vote on Citigroup's board desired by Chairman Sandy Weil, or Wheel, depending on how you pronounce that. In return, Mr. Wheel donated $1 million to the 92nd Street Y. Whew. Smoking gun was a 2001 email to a friend. Quote, everyone thinks I upgraded AT&T to get what? To get lead for AT&T? LED? L-E-A-D? I don't know what that's about. Is that like a terminology? Or get lead or lead? I'm not sure. Like the metal? Anyway. Smoking gun was an email. Everyone thinks I upgraded AT&T to get lead for AT&T wireless. Nope. I used Sandy to get my kids in 92nd Street Y preschool, parenthetically, which is harder than Harvard. And Sandy needed Armstrong's vote on our board to nuke Reed in showdown. Not sure who Reed is, but okay. Once coast was clear for both of us, i.e. Sandy clear Victor and my kids confirmed, I went back to my normal negative self on AT&T. Armstrong never knew that we both, Sandy and I, played him like a fiddle. Why would you put that in an email? And the answer is, Guilty conscience. They all want to be caught and at the same time think they are untouchable, I'm sure. That, I guess, could lead us to another take on the story that would divert our stream of consciousness here, but what the heck? Let's do it and take a look at a piece in The Atlantic by Franklin Foer and find out how long it is. I think we can actually fit this one in. It looks relatively short. Titled, "We're Losing the War on Corruption." I think this has to be the follow-up here. Paul Manafort and Felicity Huffman, he says, are twin avatars of an elite that still acts with impunity. And why not throw in Grubman and Armstrong and Weil, whatever his name is, along with that. It all fits. It's too bad, Foer begins, that Felicity Huffman has been indicted. That probably so poisons her acting career that she can't be cast as Paul Manafort's wife, Kathleen, in the inevitable biopic. I think it should be biopic. I think that was what they say, of the lobbyist's life. But Huffman and Manafort, I don't think I would ever want to. It's going to be hard to get people to agree to play Paul Manafort's wife, although maybe as long as she's portrayed as a sympathetic and long-suffering character, I guess someone will do it. But I don't know. Being associated with Paul Manafort, even in the movies, distasteful to me. But Huffman and Manafort are spiritually connected, and the fact that they are packed together above the fold today is more than an accident of timing. They are twin avatars of an elite that acts with impunity. When Paul Manafort's lawyers pressed their case for leniency in court on Wednesday, they made the argument that everyone knew about Paul Manafort's malfeasance, and therefore, how bad could it possibly be? They pointed to the fact that he met repeatedly with top government officials to kibitz about his clients in the government of Ukraine. I wrote about such meetings in my profile of Manafort, he adds. Obviously, those government officials knew him to be a lobbyist, so really what's the harm in his failing to register as required by the Foreign Agents Registration Act? In fact, the lawyers had a point. Manafort is being sent to prison for crimes that are systemic, hardly hidden, and usually elicit little more than a yawn or shrug. According to a Justice Department report in 2016, there had been 7 prosecutions for failure to comply with FARA since 1966. What makes this figure so galling is how many eminent ex-government officials have served as, quote, strategic advisors to dictatorial governments. They might represent foreign governments, but technically do not lobby Congress on their behalf. They make millions while never subjecting their work to public scrutiny or themselves to personal embarrassment. From filings in the Mueller case, we now know that the Justice Department investigated Manafort for brazen disregard of FARA in 1986, just as he was setting out in his career as a lobbyist representing foreign governments. But it could apparently never summon the will to prosecute someone so well connected. Or take the more rampant problems of tax evasion. While Manafort will serve time for failing to pay his bills to the government, armies of lawyers and accountants are feverishly devising novel methods of enabling the rich to cheat the IRS, depriving the U.S. of nearly $200 billion in revenue each year. As one old joke holds, the difference between tax avoidance, which is legal, and tax evasion, which is not, is the wall of a prison. This is the same pattern made visible by the college admissions scandal, or I didn't pay taxes because you would have squandered it, but he doesn't mention that for some reason. Not that he'd be squeamish about it, just didn't. The public gets inflamed over a supposedly outrageous piece of behavior that is really not so far from the standard elite procedure. When a wealthy donor contributes $10 million to a university, imagining that their child will someday attend, administrators call it a gift and applaud the gesture of philanthropy. But it is, in effect, institutionalized bribery, and it creates new templates of moral behavior. It makes recognizing as wrong, under-the-table payments to college coaches harder for parents. when these payments so resemble the gift giving they see officially sanctioned. That I don't know about. You give a gift of $10 million to a university, even if it's just cash, if it's building a building. Arguably, the entire student body stands to benefit from the $10 million gift in some way, although I guess it, endows a chair in something stupid that nobody studies, but, it's available, the point is. Whereas payments under the table to a college coach so that you put somebody on a fake roster for sailing, who benefits from that? I don't know. That seems pretty grubby, and I don't know how closely I would relate the two. But the idea of paying cash and then expecting to get a favor in return is obviously common to both. Anyway, fine. America never had an Edenic period when the country resided in a state of pristine civic virtue, despite what some people like to think. But the past half century has ushered in an era of rank indifference to the perils of corruption and bribery. Not so long ago, the United States had a far more robust definition of what counted as a bribe. That broad definition constrained the growth of the American lobbying industry. Back in the 1960s, lobbying hardly existed in Washington, at least not in the form and on the scale that we now know it. The ledger of officially registered lobbyists extended into the high double digits. By the 1990s, the population of lobbyists had swelled to over 10,000. If Americans are more comfortable living in a world of bribery, perhaps it's because American jurisprudence has legalized so much of it. One accelerant was Justice Anthony Kennedy's opinion in the Citizens United case in 2010. Kennedy gave the Supreme Court's official sanction to anonymous campaign contributions, overturning a long trajectory of reforms that prodded the political system in the direction of transparency and rigid limits. Kennedy's decision made tracing how political giving shapes political decisions nearly impossible. But it was even worse than that. Kennedy's justification officially circumscribed the legal definition of bribery, constraining it to encompass only the most explicit bribes and quid pro quos. He scrubbed away the founders' concern with the corrupting influence of gifts, which had been enshrined in the Constitution. Paul Manafort also helped invent this world. And by the way, so did Bob McDonnell, who recently managed to get away with it, I guess. Initially caught and disgraced, and I don't think he ever really lived that down, but eventually essentially let off the hook by this viral vector that Kennedy injected into the Supreme Court and the jurisprudential bloodstream. And P.S., we never really did find out what role his son played at Deutsche Bank and whether that had anything to do with Trump, et cetera, et cetera. But perhaps one day we'll find out more about that. Paul Manafort also helped invent this world. He pioneered the structure and practices of the modern K Street lobbying firm. At each step in his career as a lobbyist and consultant, he kept pushing the boundaries of the acceptable because his experience had shown that he would always get away with it. Until Robert Mueller came along, Manafort had every reason to believe that he would never pay a price for his malfeasance. The fact that he will now serve time is a victory in the war against corruption. That he will encounter so few of his own kind in prison is a testament to the fact that we are still losing that war. He says the war, but I say that war. Okay? Just thought that was a good follow-up to the thing. Now, let's talk about other people who may not be facing any consequences, just to make things more irritating. Two articles I have, only one of which I think I'll get to read. I got your choice, except I won't be able to hear what your decision is, and I'll just assume. GQ or Daily Beast. Both of these are coverage of, let's go with GQ because we rarely do, of Jacob Wohl, who occasionally gets mentioned on this show because of his stupid right-wing tricks, has been stupid again and caught himself up in something really dumb and ridiculous, and maybe you heard the story. Jacob Wohl allegedly caught making despicable death threats against Jacob Wohl. Yes. Not everyone is cut out for a life of crime, they say in the subheader here. This piece by Jay Willis for GQ. It's going to require a little bit of editing along the way. But you will recognize a lot in this story. When we last checked in on Jacob Wohl, I choose the story because it reminds us of how we know his name. The longtime Trump tweet reply king was in the midst of effing up a harebrained scheme to frame Robert Mueller for sexual misconduct in pretty much every way imaginable. Not framing him in every way, effing it up in every way imaginable. You remember this? He had a press conference. We have a woman who says she was raped by him, and then the woman was like, what are you talking about? And they said, oh, we have private investigators, and then they didn't have that, and you remember that scheme. Now, several months removed from that hilarious failure and flush with a fresh infusion of walking around cash from God knows where, thanks Anthony Kennedy, the teenage hedge fund fraudster turned professional Islamophobe has embarked on a new and exciting grift, making poorly produced internet pseudo-documentaries about Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Don't feed the beast, Nancy Pelosi. I just mentioned that in response to a tweet I got earlier from a Nancy Pelosi fan who was pretty sure that the three of us, me, Joan, and Armando yesterday, were being stupid, not understanding the 11-dimensional chess genius of Nancy Pelosi on various subjects, impeachment included, and I guess since we also disagreed with her approach to the Ilhan Omar, or some of us did anyway, resolution. We were basically told we were being foolish and not understanding that this was all a particular style of Pelosi genius. But okay. Anyway, out of respect for your time and intelligence, dear reader, Jay tells us I do not include a link to Wohl's fake documentary. The final product leans heavily on dramatic footage of Wohl and fellow MAGA celebrity Laura Loomer, lately became famous chaining herself to things, right? Doing things like knocking on the front door of Omar's home. And then, when no one answers, reacting as if her absence constitutes irrefutable evidence of a diabolical plot to transform the Great Lakes region into a shadow Sharia caliphate. Okay. The most notable thing about a sequence in which they express shock at visible signs of Somali culture inside a prominent Somali mall, honestly, is the patience everyone else in said mall extends to these leering doofuses who insist on filming strangers' shopping trips. Where the gang really goes wrong, however, and I use that phrase in the context of the specific project, not their lives in general, is when they walk into a Minneapolis police station to report their receipt of, quote, death threats, unquote, from social media users who became aware of their presence in town thanks to Wohl's and Loomer's many contemporaneous announcements of their presence in town on social media. Hi there, we're journalists in town, for business, for what we're doing. Wohl begins using exactly the sort of language professional journalists employ when talking to literally anyone. That's a quote, by the way, the hi there, we're journalists in town. As he converses with the presumably bewildered officer on duty, the film cuts to a series of screenshots of scary-looking DMs. By the way, can I just re-emphasize how eloquently he puts that? We're journalists in town, for business, for what we're doing. That's a great description. So what are you doing? We're doing what we're doing. All right, well, here are the screenshots of the death threats. I hope you effing know that if bump into you in Dinkytown or anywhere else in my city, I'm going to shoot you and, I guess, S word on your effing bodies. Get that F word out my city, you piece of S. Now, so those are the death threats. As noted by actual Minneapolis journalist Tony Webster, however, one of the screenshots features a Twitter account whose pictures bears a startling resemblance to that used by Drake Holmes, Holmes. That's one of Jacob Wool's several fake accounts that precipitated his suspension from the service last fall. Drake, according to his bio, is a, quote, diversity coordinator whose antipathy toward racists and, quote, homophones, not phobes, but phones, homophones, which is a real word, just has nothing to do with this, runs so deep, apparently, that he misspelled his own last name when creating his handle, Drake Holmes, Homes, 612. It appears, in other words, that at least one very serious threat of violence against Jacob Wool may have originated from Jacob Wool himself. That sounds pretty dumb. Assuming Wool used the same screenshot for his police report, he may have a more pressing problem on his hands than shoddy fake account management practices. Minnesota Statutes 2018, Section 609.505, Subdivision 1, makes providing false information to a law enforcement officer a misdemeanor. Under state law, such offenses are punishable, not publishable either, by up to 90 days in jail, a fine of up to $1,000, or both. According to Webster, Minneapolis police are reviewing the documents Wool provided, and if they are eligible for release, will make them public by the end of the day. I would reach out to Wool via DM, direct message, for comment, as I did last time I wrote about his alleged crimes-doing escapades. But alas, both he and Loomer are banned from Twitter. Hope they read GQ. Pretty weird. I just wanted to bring you up to date on what that idiot is up to and how he's getting himself in trouble some more. But I guess he, too, thinks he is just untouchable in all this. And I don't really know why that's the case. I guess I'll leave off here for today with the information also, I think, provided to us by listeners, tipping us off to the fact that Mark Warner is now working in his role as, I guess, ranking minority member in the Intelligence Committee over in the Senate, joining with Republicans in an effort to control how Trump grants and revokes security clearances. Of course, this grows out of the fact that he ordered Jared Kushner to be granted a security clearance while also revoking the security clearances of critics like ex-CIA Director John Brennan. Ken Delanian reporting this piece in the wake of abuse of power accusations over President Donald Trump's handling of the nation's secrets. The ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee is joined with a key Republican in seeking to impose rules on how the president grants and revokes security clearances. The proposed Integrity and Security Clearance Determinations Act would seek to ensure that the security clearance process is fair, objective, transparent, and accountable by requiring decisions on clearances to be based on published criteria, according to a bill description obtained by NBC News. The bill, expected to be introduced Thursday, that's today, by Senator Mark Warner of Virginia and Republican committee member Susan Collins, who everyone loves, up in Maine, would bar the executive branch from revoking security clearances for purposes of political retaliation or based on expressions of political opinions or personal views. It would also prohibit agencies from using security clearances to punish whistleblowers or discriminate on the basis of sex, gender, religion, age, handicap, or national origin. All an interesting concept, and I guess my first question for it all is, does it prohibit it, or does it actually have penalties attached to it? I'm curious about whether we're just going to go down exactly the same path we always do and say, well, I'll make it against the law, but I'll also make it so that nothing happens to you if you get caught breaking that law. Well, I guess presumably the security clearance revoked could be reinstated, or the one granted could be revoked. Maybe. I'm not certain now. I'm pretty sure they probably contemplated that in there, but, no one goes to jail or anything, so what the hell, right? Besides which, the president who does it can then pardon himself or anyone else for having violated it. So, I don't know. We seem to be going around in circles here. This is it's a piece of legislation that I guess belongs on the books, but I can't get too enthusiastic about it. I I won't refuse to endorse it, but what difference does that make anyway? Anyway, I just thought I'd put it on record. Warner thinks he's doing something useful here, and I have my doubts about how useful it will actually be, but sure, go ahead, put it on the books. I don't know that I want Collins associated with it, but what the hell? Anyway, just we'll keep an eye on that one. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, and we have some listener. I say user because we're affiliated with the blog, but listener contributions, some of which have been stored away for some time. But hopefully we can squeeze those in. In the meantime, it's time for Justice Putnam's program, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, coming up next. And you better believe the good stuff is coming in the next hour.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
There's the big stuff. 16 new state charges against Manafort in New York City holds some strong messages for individual one. And how about this? Federal judge smacked down Betsy DeVos's racist attempt to thwart special education. And then that Colt 45 Trump-loving developer flipped out after a cyber expert flagged major security flaws in his MAGA Safe Spaces app. Yes, I'm going on after the music. You bet. We'll be back tomorrow.